Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune, and here we are. It is officially the offseason, but it's not. There is no such thing as one Josh Pate of Pate State says. There's no such thing as offseason anymore in college football. The news is a coming, and it's a coming fast, and we've got a lot to talk about as far as defensive coordinators, transfer portal stuff, recruiting, because there's a big junior day coming up. What else is there going on? Basketball. Oklahoma plays tomorrow. We're recording this on a Tuesday. They play TCU tomorrow. Oklahoma is ranked 9th in the country right now in basketball. They are 13-1. What a hot start for the men's basketball program. And obviously, there's a defensive coordinator change, among other things, as far as the staffers go in Oklahoma or at the University of Oklahoma. So much to talk about in a time period, Parker, that should be dead. Oh, and by the way, there was a national title game last night.
There
We can
was.
probably touch on that
There
too.
was. Not really pertinent to anything in the
Yeah,
Oklahoma circle, other than the fact that Sharon Moore, former Oklahoma offensive lineman, now has a
dude.
national championship ring. Feel great for
I,
him.
I agree, and I think he has a chance to be one of the next in line to be one of the next head coaches at Oklahoma if Brent Venables ever decides to step away.
And we talk a ton of football and recruiting on this particular podcast. If you are more inclined to follow Sooner Hoops coverage, especially this time of year, we will talk hoops on this podcast. However, Jesse Crittenden and Brody Lusk head up our basketball coverage at OUinsider.com. They do a fantastic job discussing everything. They've got a podcast on YouTube called In the Paint. You can find it on the OU Insider YouTube channel, which I imagine some of you are watching right now. That's going to keep you up to speed on a weekly basis with everything that is happening in front of your eyes and behind the scenes with regard to Sooner Hoops. I tell you, man, Brody is the youngest member of our crew. He does phenomenal work. He's getting taken for a ride right now with that Oswin Eramunse recruitment. I am very glad that we have him on board to do the dirty work for us, because that is one of the most bizarre recruitments. And I imagine I don't know as much as Brody does, but holy smokes, man. That has been quite the saga over the last few days.
The funny thing is people were making jokes about his reporting on it, right? And then here comes, I believe on 3 had similar reporting like the very next day. Like OU was out in front, and now they're kind of like the team that's on the outskirts.
Yeah, then they weren't in the
and
mix.
now they're back in it
back
somehow, some way, if they decide they want to take him. And there's like,
see, this is why this is why we hired Brody, right? Because if you can believe this, basketball recruiting is even more insufferable than football recruiting.
Yeah.
Football recruiting, you got to deal with a lot more guys. But in basketball recruiting, you maybe only have to deal with 10 or 12 every single cycle, but you can get some characters.
The egos are big in basketball. It's why the NBA is so popular. There's only 5 guys on the court on each team every time, 10 total. And you get to see their faces, you get to see their personalities, and that is why basketball recruiting is a headache. And I remember when we first, Parker, you and I first started working together, and we were both like, I tried to cover both, and I was like, F that. I am out on the basketball. Like I covered it all the way through 2018 with Jalen Hill, and I was done after that. And it just like the Trey Young saga about ran me through a freaking, that was insufferable. And I love Trey. And I think Trey, and it wasn't Trey and it wasn't his dad. It was just that he had Kentucky and Kansas and all that coming at him.
Yeah.
And when you were that big of a name, the drama and the chaos just gets bumped up to a whole nother level. So that one burnt me out. It's like covering quarterbacks essentially before they commit, no, it's like covering defensive linemen in recruiting, because defensive linemen are always all over the place in college football because they're the outside of quarterbacks. They're the top type of talent that you want on your team, because you can't win without good offensive linemen. But offensive linemen are notorious for being just team guys, so they're super easy to cover generally outside of Grant Bricks. And sorry, Parker, that one was tough for you. And
it was tough. It wasn't the worst.
So I mean, but generally, it's it's the defensive linemen, the quarterbacks, and the wide receivers that are really, really difficult to cover
Now,
in football.
Now, before we go any further, a reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. Cheers to the new year from our friends at Manscaped. Your resolutions shouldn't be the only things that are well kept in 2024. It's the time for new heights, new opportunities, and a new look for your Times Square balls. Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is every man's cheat code to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence this year. So whether you're looking to maintain a trim or go for that clean-shaven look, this trimmer has you covered. Trusted by over 10 million men worldwide, now is your time to get a grip on your grooming with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code OUinsider for 20% off and free shipping. Happy New Year and happy new balls. Introducing the MVP of 2024 Manscaped's 5th generation lawnmower. It's not just a trimmer, it's your grooming sidekick. Let's face it, resolutions might come and go, but a well-groomed you is here to stay thanks to Manscaped. For men who want the full grooming experience, look no further than the Performance Package 5.0. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code OUinsider at manscaped.com, because nothing says Happy New Year like a deal that leaves your balls and your budget feeling refreshed. Embrace a new you, and definitely embrace a new trimmer, courtesy of Manscaped. Now, Brandon, as we sit here recording this on Tuesday evening, Zack Alley has still not been officially announced as the new defensive coordinator and linebackers coach at the University of Oklahoma. We all know and understand that that is coming here at some point. It is not official. It has been 5 days since the reports made the rounds that he was the pending hire. But this is the first podcast that we have done since our emergency podcast in the aftermath of Ted Roof's departure, I should say, and obviously the pending hiring of Zack Alley. So for those unfamiliar, I would imagine the majority of our audience has done their research on the man that is set to be Venable's right-hand guy on the Sooner staff moving forward. But for those unfamiliar with Zack Alley's background, 8 years at Clemson as a student assistant and then a graduate assistant. He coached linebackers for 2 years at Boise State. He spent a year as the defensive coordinator at Louisiana Monroe, and he has spent the last 2 seasons as the defensive coordinator for the Gamecocks of Jacksonville State. That is Zack Alley, 30 years old.
Okay.
And
I'm
set to be
behind here.
introduced.
Just a second, because I had been taking care of an infant before we hopped on this podcast. Lee Davis is leaving.
Yes, Lee Davis is leaving. By the time this podcast goes public, she may have announced her new destination. She got a better job. It's a job that one can understand her leaving Oklahoma for. Larger role. I have no doubt it comes with a substantial salary increase. So, yeah, Lee Davis is leaving. The Sooners will be looking for a new director of on-campus recruiting. And so I guess you're on the precipice of hiring 2 new staffers here between Zack Alley and Lee Davis, Lee Davis's replacement.
Yeah. So let's talk about Zack Alley. I know you brought this up because I had information on it that you and I texted about earlier today and talked on the phone about. So look, at Oklahoma, it just takes time for announcement. That tracks. At Oklahoma, that it just takes time for announcements to come out because you have to have the correct wording on all the contracts. You have to cross all your I's, dot all your I's, cross all your T's, do all that type of stuff. And Joe C is a stickler for those types of things, and rightfully so. So he's been in Norman since Friday. So he's been around the staff. He's been in Norman. He's been doing things around the offices and stuff like that. But as far as a formal and official announcement from our man Mike Houth, the obviously the SID for the University of Oklahoma, the head of the communications, he does it all, man. He's a historian on top of just knowing all things Oklahoma. He does all the announcements for them as well when it comes to all that. So, and he's very particular about all those things. And again, rightfully so. That's why Mike is one of the best to do it in college football. And so, It's going to happen this week. From my understanding, it's taking place. The announcement will happen this week. I don't expect anything other than Zack Alley to be the defensive coordinator, linebacker coach for the University of Oklahoma. I guess maybe there could be, I guess, position wise, I haven't heard anything other than that. Have you, Parker? I mean, all I keep hearing is that he's DC and linebacker coach. I mean, that's kind of the
Yeah.
title that
I
he's,
mean,
so
it's a one for one
co-DC.
replacement of Ted
Yeah,
Reed.
exactly. And so, and I know there's some that are out there going, well, what if this or what if that? No, 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 no. No, it's got to be one for one because you can only have so many on your as on field coaches uh, signed under contracts. Like there's rules and regulations, or programs like Oklahoma, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Texas, the teams that have all that money, they would have all the best coaches just gaggled up right there, and it would be impossible for anybody else. Parity would not be what it is in college football these days. So that's where that stands. I love the hire. He's young, energetic. He's going to reach an audience as far as recruiting. He still has the Southeast connections being at Jacksonville. Um, he's it just fits, man. Like I think at the end of the day, when you look at it and you look at it from a perspective of OU and what they were looking for and trying to keep, Ted Roof, despite what people want to think of him, the dude could recruit, and he was a good recruiter. You look at the linebackers that he helped bring in with Brent Venables in year one in that 2023 class. That's an absurd linebacker class. He obviously they only brought in one linebacker this year, but it was a really good linebacker. They brought in some decent portal guys that everybody wanted. Now, how they developed when they got on campus, that's a whole other story. But I mean, he's done his job up to that point, and he's been essentially that title. And I think my understanding of it is that Brent wants a little bit less hands on, and nobody outside of Brandon Hall, Todd Bates, and Miguel Chavis knows Brent Venables' defense the way that Zack Alley knows
Well,
it. And
and I think it's worth pointing out, Brandon, I in the last 10, 15 years, like ever since Venables left for Clemson, I think obviously Brandon Hall has worked the most with Venables over the years when you consider their tenure together at Oklahoma originally when Hall was a student assistant and then a GA. But uh, ever since Venables left for Clemson, so you want to talk about the the mark of delineation in Brent Venables' career, pre-Clemson and post-Clemson, right? At that 2011 mark. Since that time, nobody has worked with Brent Venables longer than Zack Alley amongst the Sooners' current staffers, if I'm not mistaken.
that is correct. I'm over here trying to fix my light, so that is why my camera is not on. But yes, that is correct. He's been with Brent, I think, a total of 9 years. So when you look at all that, um, it just makes sense from just the hiring, his understanding, and look, to top it off, I think, and I do not like this light because it makes my face look all red. To top it off, he was around Brent when Brent started running more 30 front. And I think that's the difference between him and Coach Hall. Coach Hall was around during the early days when it was a 4-2-5. It was still multiple, and they would still do a lot of things with the spinner, and all that with Dan Cody, and doing a lot of the Roy back, which is essentially the cheetah now. They did all those things, right? Everything stayed the same when it comes to all that, schematically, personnel wise. But Brent at Clemson decided he wanted to run some 30 front and be more multiple with his looks, with his front seven, and be a little bit more versatile in attacking run fits, and being able to be a little bit more chaotic. That 30 front allows you to be a little bit more chaotic when it comes to blitzes and be a little bit more glitz and glam, I guess is the best way to put it when it comes little add more spice to the blitz packages that you can bring out with the defense. So Alley was around for that. And I think some people want to ask, okay, well, why not Brandon Hall? Like, makes sense. Just why not just make the guy that built that Troy defense that continues to be phenomenal? They're running the exact same defense that he was running and he built with the exact same personnel almost to a T that Brandon Hall built before he left and became the safeties coach at the University of Oklahoma. Well, the reason is the 30 front stuff. The and also there's a relationship, there like that's a the Hall Venables relationship is very, very deep. It's a to its core, kind of like with Todd Bates and Chavis, like it's a father son type deal with all those guys with Brent Venables. So the demand that it takes to be the defensive coordinator at the University of Oklahoma, and particularly under Brent Venables, who wants to take a step back and be more of a Bob Stoops CEO type guy. Like he'll sit in on the meetings, but he doesn't want to have a full hand, be making the calls and doing all that he did over the last few seasons. And originally he didn't. If y'all remember, they started out 3-0 in 2022, and Venables was letting Ted Roof make all the calls, right? Well, as things started to fall apart a little bit at K State and then on to Texas, Venables decided it was all him. Like he's going to take it over, and he never really relinquished that duty. And I think he wants to get back to that where he can just be the CEO type. He can be kind of the player's go-to guy as far as the head coach. He sets the culture, sets the standard, but is also like Bob Stoops and Barry Switzer, where they were just pure player coaches. The players absolutely loved and adored those guys. And I think that's where Brent's trying to get to. And at the end of the day, I think that's a smart move, Parker. I really do. I think that having a guy like Zack Alley that's run a defense at multiple schools and been very successful, mind you. I mean, what Jacksonville State only gave up 21 points a game last year, and that's counting the P5 programs that they played, right? If you throw out the P5 programs and the Liberties of the world that they played that were elite compared to their talent, I think they only gave up like 14, 15 points a game at most. Like they were tough on defense for the most part last year and the year before. So he's done a really good job. He's cut his teeth, obviously in the G5 level. G5 is going to be a little bit different, but again, he's 29. He was part of the 24/7 sports when we were there, Parker, at 30 under 30, right? Rising stars in the coaching world in college football. I I love this hire, Parker. I think that he's going to be the fact that he's coached in Louisiana and he's cut his teeth throughout the South. He's going to have some of the same, I guess, connections that you need to make big moves, obviously, in the South, right? He's just never had the logo next on his chest when he walked into those coaches' office in those schools that he's going to have now. That OU logo is going to carry a lot of weight. And with his personality and the way he develops and recruits, I think it's a win-win for OU.
Well, it's a huge win, I think, because if you have read the stories that have been done about Zack Alley and you've seen him described as a Brent Venables clone, right? And you're mindful of everything that Venables has on his plate as a head coach. I think the best thing that you can hope for as an Oklahoma fan is that Brent Venables has somebody that he can hand the reins of his defense to that is cut from the Venables cloth, quite literally. I mean,
Mm.
Alley had his formative experiences and spent his formative years as a coach learning under Brent Venables. Everything that he knows, everything that he does, everything that he is about was directly influenced by Brent Venables. So I think what is most encouraging about this move to me is that long term, well, and even short term for that matter, Venables can give Alley full creative control, if you will, of this defense
Mm.
and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's going to be run according to his principles, according to his philosophies, according to everything that he espouses as a coach. And with a guy like Ted Roof, Ted Roof was he was a good stopgap for Oklahoma, right? He was somebody that came in with a ton of experience, wasn't going to be overwhelmed by the task at hand, and could help and provide support as the Sooners ushered in the Venables era and instilled a new defensive culture. But you can't, and I don't think Brent Venables ever could lend full creative control of the defense to Ted
Yeah.
Roof because, and like, this is not a bad thing at all, but Ted Roof has 35 years of coaching experience on his resume, right?
Mm.
And you don't know if you say, okay, Ted, go, you don't necessarily know that everything he's doing is going to be in line with what you envision defense at Oklahoma to be and to look like, because you don't know if Roof, whether unconsciously or consciously, is going to be drawing on some of the things that he has picked up over his previous 30 years in the business, right? And so
Mm.
Venables knows that everything Alley's going to be doing is straight out of his own script. And if this hire pans out and Alley proves popular among recruits, and we see Oklahoma play solid defense in the SEC these first couple years, Brandon, I think there's going to come a point at which between Alley and Brent Venables, the Sooners are going to be able to recruit linebackers better than anybody in the country. And I don't think they're far off in that department right now, but especially if the Sooners can have some microwave success on defense, I mean, smashing success, like national top 25 type of defensive success, then that is where things open up dramatically and you have the opportunity to be competitive in the recruitments of dudes where maybe you've had a shot in the past. I think of like a Sammy Brown, right? Where Oklahoma was in that thing, but never option one and always
Mhm.
playing second fiddle to somebody. Those are the types of recruitments where going forward, you're going to be able to legitimately go toe to toe with Clemson and Georgia and Alabama and so forth, and be able to have just as good of a shot as everybody.
Yeah, no, uh, look, the linebacker recruiting to start again. I thought Ted Roof did a really good job, but I think it's going, as weird as it is to say, I think a notch up is possible, right? Like they landed what, three of the top 200 players in the country in 2023, right? Something to that extent.
At
Lewis
linebacker,
Carter, yeah, Samuel Masigo, Lewis Carter. Who else am I missing here
you're
off the top
missing
of my
Phil
head?
Picciotti, but he wasn't a
No, but
top
who
200
else
guy
did they
yet.
bring in?
Taylor Heim was the fourth.
Taylor Heim. Okay, so two of the top 150 players in the country, I would
Yes.
assume. Yep. Um, it is what it could get better, and that's weird to say because you know you got James Nesta in 2024 who has been skyrocketing up the rankings
Sure.
as
But like,
his.
and I brought up the example of Sammy Brown, right? Like you could have had Sammy Brown, but you're
Mhm.
probably 3 or 4 years away from having a legitimate, mano a mano battle with Clemson where the playing field is totally even for a guy like Sammy
Mhm.
Brown. You rewind to the 2022 cycle. Sooners had a real good shot with Troy Bowles, right? Like
Yeah.
3, 4 years down the road, if Alley and Venables' defensive alliance leads to great success on that side of the ball in Norman, you're going to be able to pursue a guy like Troy Bowles, and you're not going to finish second this time, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the type of battle you're actually going to win.
Yeah, and you see it. I think you've seen it at safety with Venables, Brandon Hall. You've seen it at defensive line now with Chavis, Bates, and Venables, right? You've seen cornerback be just really strong in their recruiting, right? So I think the one position everybody expected to just be automatic 5 stars was linebacker, and I don't think this region produces. I think that's more of a southeast, northern, Midwest type of position that produces a little bit more of the hierarchy linebackers. And having said that, obviously you got Marcus James in 2025, right, in your own state. Trinae Washington potentially in your own state. I think he's one of those guys that can end up playing a stand-up outside linebacker, do a lot of different things because of his athleticism and how twitchy he is. I mean, you're still getting athletes, like really good athletes. Like Marcus James is going to be a top 150 type, 200 type player when it's all said and done, but he's raw. And what Parker's talking about is that's that next level, right? That Troy Bowles, that Sammy Brown level, where they come in and they're automatically just thrust into the rotation because they're studs. And it's been a while since that's taken place at Oklahoma. I think Danny Stutzman was the last guy to do that, but that was just by sheer nature of having no depth in 2021. And it just is what it is. So, um, I, again, I think you're also going to see an uptick in defensive line recruiting just because you're going to have such a magnetic young personality, a guy that a lot of the coaches in the Southeast, where generally a lot of the tier defensive linemen come from, they're going to really like Zack Alley because they've been around him for years when he's been at UL Monroe and Jacksonville State and obviously Clemson. So there's going to be an understanding of this guy knows what it takes. This guy understands the recruiting game. He understands Brent Venables' defense. And to me, Parker, I don't know, man. I see this as the right step going into the SEC. I really do. I think with the talent, you're returning dang near 11 starters on defense. Like, that is crazy. Crazy. Like, on paper, OU on paper has one of the better defenses in college football next year. On paper. But
Well, I
the next
I,
step's got to be
I
taken. And I don't know that, and it's not a knock at Roof, Parker. It's just
well, and
how
I
much
don't know.
further can he take them?
Yeah, no doubt. And like and that's kind of that's kind of my point here is that I don't know. I don't think you can say that on paper Oklahoma has one of the best defenses in college football next year. I think what you can say is that on paper,
Experience, I
A,
guess.
Oklahoma's got one of the most experienced
Yeah.
defenses, and B, on paper, the pieces are there for
Yeah.
Oklahoma to have one of the best defenses in college football. Now, whether or not that happens, a lot of that, especially with the degree of experience and depth that Oklahoma has defensively, a lot of that is going to fall on the shoulders of the guy calling the plays. And so I think we will find out pretty immediately just how good the returns are going to be on this Zack Alley hire because he is inheriting a situation where he has every tool you could ask for, every
Mhm.
piece you could ask for to put together a top 25, even top 20 defense in college football. If he can pull it off, and I think Jacksonville State was maybe 33rd in the country in total defense this
Yeah.
past season.
Hmm.
All in all, very good, especially for a program that was making the transition from the FCS to the FBS and
Yep.
competing at the FBS level for the very first time in program history. And so Zack Alley was dealt a very favorable hand right off the bat here at Oklahoma. And if he plays that hand well,
Mm.
and Oklahoma is above average, even excellent on the defensive side of the ball, you're obviously going to lose some pieces heading into 2025, no doubt. But again, I think the payoff that that could have on the recruiting trail and even in the transfer portal, man, could offset that such that you set this program up in a position where they're not necessarily looking at a major drop off defensively once Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman and Woody Washington and those guys graduate and move on. I think at that point, 2024 feels so crucial because if you can take these pieces and you can churn out a nationally regarded competitive defense, then that is where the machine can originate. And if you get that machine humming, man, you're going to be able to replenish year after year after year with dudes bringing up more dudes who are capable of playing defense at the highest level at the University of Oklahoma and contributing to one of the best and most well-rounded defensive units in college football.
When you said dudes, bringing up more dudes, all I could think about was Tropic Thunder and Robert Downey Jr. when he said, I'm just a dude, playing another dude. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen that movie in years.
All right. Anyways, um, so yeah, no, I agree. I just I wonder if Zach Alley is going to be on the field. I want to see, like, you know how reserved Venables has been since he's been at Oklahoma, as far as he's not needed a get back guy really. Like that to me has been probably one of the weirdest things, because for the better part of my from the time I was 16 to the time I was, he was there 11 years, 27. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 27. He needed a get back guy at Oklahoma, and that was Jerry Schmidt. Then you roll over to Clemson and you need a get back guy. I don't know the guy's name at Clemson, obviously, but he needed a get back guy at Clemson. I wonder if Zach Alley brings that same sort of intensity, right? Like that same sort of ferocity on the sideline. That stupid fly in this office, I'm about to kill it. Um, Same sort of ferocity on the sideline that, again, I think has been lacking on the defensive side. Yeah, Chavis, Bates, Hall, Valai, they bring a lot of intensity, but when the guy calling the plays has that just edge to him, right? Your defense tends to play with that edge. The personnel plays with that edge along with the head guy calling those plays, right? I think that's generally the take that a lot of people not necessarily assume, but I guess they notice, particularly fans, like, well, Venable's defense played with his sort of intensity because he's always needing that get back guy to pull back. And I wonder if Alley, being 29 years old, super young, super intense, super energetic, I really hope he's not up in the box like Roof was. I want him to be on the ground
I don't
and
think,
just
yeah, I don't think he will be in the box because, again, like, I'm trying to think, has he ever been in the box? I'm pretty sure
I
he's
don't
always
know. I
been on
haven't
the
paid much
field.
attention to
And
Jacksonville State, man.
yeah, well, and when I think it all kind of depends on your style as a coach, right? And there are guys who are more inclined to be physically present on the sideline, firing up their guys and interacting with them in real time. And I don't think about it this way. Brent Venables was absolutely never going to go sit up in a box. And if Zack Alley is a Brent Venables clone, as so many have asserted, there's not a chance he's going to be sitting in
Yeah,
a
that's
box.
the assumption, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the assumption, and I hope that is the case. And so you would probably have to move somebody up. I don't know who, it might be Brandon Hall. I know Brandon Hall prefers to be on the ground. So does Chavis and Bates. They like being on the ground. And Valai, I think maybe you just have some of your, you know, I guess analysts up there helping you with the bird's eye view. That may be your best bet to do that. I don't know. I really don't know, but um, yeah, that I think that's enough on Zach Alley. We expect the announcement sometime this week. So, and
Transfer
it's a great
portal.
hire. Great. Yep, that's kind of where I was going, was transfer portal. Uh, Oklahoma just got Jake Roberts tied in. Uh, you had a really good interview with him, and I think not only are people excited to have him and just have that tight end room now look like that tight end room is ridiculously talented now. I mean, you got Devon Mitchell, Caden Helms, Caden McIntyre, uh, uh,
Bauer Sharp.
Bauer Sharp, and then Jake Roberts. That went from just having Austin Stogner to having a bunch of dudes.
It's a
Like,
real interesting group because you also don't really have any clue who the week one starter is. And I I would lean towards Jake Roberts right now just because he's easily going to have the most familiarity with Latrell's offense. And he's got a breadth of experience at the Power 5 level. Well, and at the
Mm.
FBS level, in more generally speaking. And so I would give him the edge over Bauer Sharp and over two guys that are coming back from injury. Obviously, very different injuries. Cade McIntyre broke his hand, and Caden Helms is dealing with that knee issue that sidelined him for the entire 2023 season. I would probably give Jake Roberts the edge to start in, well, come the beginning of the 2024 season. But I think athletically, the ceiling is so high with Sharp. Obviously, there's a ton to like about McIntyre. If Helms is the player that he was before that injury and he's not substantially impaired in the long term by everything he's been through physically, he's got an immensely high ceiling. And then you toss in the freak show, true freshman, and Devon Mitchell. Man, that is a revamped room. No doubt about that.
Mm.
And you throw in a guy that did play snaps here and there for the Sooners in 2023 and the walk-on, Josh Fanuel, man, there's going to be healthy competition in that group. And right, that you're not relying, at the very least, you're not relying on one guy the way you were relying on Austin Stogner in 2023. You're going to have a multiplicity of guys that are capable of going in there and contributing as blockers and as pass catchers. And that, if you're an Oklahoma football fan, should get you very, very excited, because the tight end, all in all, was a very lackluster chess piece in the Oklahoma offense in 2023. I do not anticipate that's going to be the case in 2024.
Yeah, I just I look, Levy's offense was not the way things were set. It just wasn't right for Austin Stogner. He's an over the middle tight end, and I think it would have been really interesting to see how all that worked out if Latrell would have been the OC the whole season with Joe John, because I think you would have seen a lot of different, I guess personnel sets and routes for Stogner that would have been more in line with his, I guess, talents. Just like Lincoln Riley Muleshoe used to run some really good routes for Stogner, and it's what made him one of the better tight ends on the Big 12 before obviously he had his knee issue. And so I think at the end of the day, Stogner became a really good blocker, and the coaches have talked about it, and they talked about Cole Kublik talked about it during the telecast of the Alamo Bowl, just how good of a blocker he's become. Um, but the tight end position is going to be way more versatile next year, by far. It's going to be faster. Um, I don't. It's just going to be different, right? Like Devon Mitchell in himself brings just a completely different type of tight end. I don't know what type of blocker he's going to be yet, Parker. I have no clue. But what I do know is he's going to be a hell of a mismatch for linebackers out in the open and safeties if you use that catch radius correctly. I think Jake Roberts is more in line with probably Stogner, a little bit more fluid, obviously,
Yeah,
but
well,
he's
and
a blocker.
the key distinguishing factor with Jake Roberts and the other four tight ends in the room, and this could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. It's just all I'm pointing out is that this is a distinguishing characteristic, is that Jake Roberts is a born and bred tight end.
Yeah,
Devon Mitchell, Cade McIntyre, Caden Helms, those are all converted wide receivers. Bauer Sharp is a converted quarterback. So that is the one true tight end, like a guy with a tight end bloodline, I suppose. That's what he's always been. That's what he always imagined that he would be. Obviously, the other guys are guys that were simply too big and too athletic to go anywhere else. So they
yeah,
ended up at tight end.
yeah. Again, I mean, that to me screams a lot. And I think the other thing that people are going to wonder now is this is Jake Roberts' last season, so there will not be a crossover between him and his brother Nate. So let's make that clear. The issue is, does that help Oklahoma with Nate Roberts in 2025? I've generally always thought Oklahoma was always in the lead. I know there's some Ohio State people because of the connections up there that feel like they have the lead, and you've seen some of the picks come in there. Nate Roberts will be in Norman at the end of this month, I believe, um, for the junior day. I believe that's correct. Don't quote me 100% on that. He said he was coming to the junior day when I talked to him in December. I haven't talked to him in a few weeks. That possibly could have changed. He was in Norman visiting with his brother, I believe, when they did when
That
Jake
he
was
is.
offered.
That he was, yes.
So I mean that can't hurt. I mean, you get a free visit because he's family. I mean, so even during a dead period for high school, he's allowed to go in and visit Oklahoma because he's coming with his brother. And to have him return again, I think that's cool. I think that's a really cool deal for Oklahoma. I still think Oklahoma's going to be really hard to beat for Nate Roberts. His relationship with Kevin Sperry is deep. So I don't know. What's your gauge on that as well, Parker?
Yeah, in the end, I think proximity wins out
Mm-hmm.
because he has his pick of the litter in a very legitimate sense, right? He has every offer that a kid of that caliber dreams of getting or that possibly could accumulate. Like, find me a school, find me a Power Five contender that hasn't offered Nate Roberts. You could probably count them on one hand amongst the upper echelon schools across the Power Five that have not extended an offer to the superb tight end out of Washington, Oklahoma. But part of the reason he fell out of love with Notre Dame, not the primary reason, but part of the reason was that it was so far away, right? And I think just knowing his situation, knowing that family dynamic, yes, obviously he's going to consider every single school that offers him. He's going to develop those relationships with all of those coaches, kind of whittle it down from there. And that's what he's done to this point. When he reopened his recruitment after decommitting from Notre Dame, he said, look, I want to take it slow this time around. I don't want to rush a decision. I want to be 110% certain that where I commit is where I want to go, because I already, I kind of counted my chickens before they hatched once at Notre Dame the first time around. And so I'm not surprised that this thing has been as deliberate and as comprehensive as it has, but I think there is so much that makes sense about Oklahoma, Brandon, that here's almost how I look at it. If you were a fan of any other team in the market or in the running for Nate Roberts' services, how are you going about convincing yourself right now that he doesn't go to Oklahoma? Because all of the typical conventional
Family.
signs and indicators that you look at and that you evaluate when you're dealing with one of the country's top recruits, all of those signs and indicators seem to point towards Oklahoma. Now, that doesn't always mean, like, I remember kind of having the same conversation with Peyton Pierce, right? And recruiting will surprise you sometimes. That's just how it goes. Peyton Pierce committed to Ohio State after one visit up there, and that was that. And it took us all by surprise, but that's the nature of the game. Recruiting will
Yeah.
throw you a curveball from time to time. But
Yeah.
I just truly do not anticipate that's what's going to happen here with Nate Roberts now, especially with his brother committed to OU. I think there is, on paper, a zillion things that make a ton of sense about the fit at Oklahoma. And while other schools certainly have appealing pitches to a player of that ilk, I think Oklahoma has the strongest pitch by far. And location, certainly being 20 minutes away, that is a convenient asset that Oklahoma has at their disposal.
Yeah, I agree. I again, yeah, he's got family up in Ohio. I think that kind of negates some of the location issues, but does it? Because I mean, how far is Notre Dame South Bend from Columbus? What, 4 or 5 hours? Three? Something to that extent? It's not that big of a jaunt, right? And if it was a big deal there, I assume it's still going to matter, right? Even at Ohio State. It's one thing to have a grandparent and uncle and stuff around. It's another thing to have your brother and your mom and your dad and sisters and brothers and all that. Like that's a completely different dynamic. Your comfort zone is your interior family, and at the end of the day, if that's really where his heart is at, I think Oklahoma becomes very, very difficult to beat. And the more he's around the program, the more he's around Kevin Sperry, the more they train together, the more they run routes, and he goes and catches balls from Kevin Sperry, and they continue to build that, QB tight end relationship on the field, and that friend relationship off the field. I think that makes it more and more difficult for OU to be beat as well for the top tight ends. So I like my pick. I know you like your pick. I know that there's been picks that keep rolling in to Ohio State. If it happens, it is what it is. But I'm going to tell you this: if Nate Roberts goes to Ohio State, OU has a really good shot with Deshaun Brand. They have a really good shot with Lincoln Cure. And I know OU is very, very high on Lincoln Cure. Several people I've talked to, very high on Lincoln Cure.
It's kind of hard not to be high on Lincoln
Yeah,
Cure.
there's a lot of people
That
that
is a
equate
five
him to
star.
to
You will
Mark
not convince
Andrews.
me otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that think he's Mark Andrews. And then there's the Arkansas situation. I'm going to just say it. They're the Arkansas situation with the Has brothers. I mean, like, we'll see, right? Like, you never know how they can't transfer now. They have to stay. They can transfer. They cannot transfer to another SEC school. The only window they can do that in is fall and winter windows as far as transfer. So they have to wait till September to pop in the transfer portal if they wanted to transfer to an Alabama or Georgia or an Oklahoma, those type of schools. So, and if Arkansas has trouble and Pittman is gone, there is a world where I think the Has brothers could be looking at Oklahoma again. I don't know that. Like, nobody has said anything to me, Parker. This is my gut feeling. This is my gut feeling that I think there's a world where that happens once again. At least potentially. I don't, because I know they've got a lot of family history at the University of Arkansas. So I want people to understand that, like, they love the Has family loves Arkansas. The only reason why I think that could be potential is just if there's mass exodus as far as that staff goes. And you come in, you play for that one staff, and you get really comfortable with that one staff, and that the way you're used by that staff and that offense, and then something comes in and undertakes you because it's a complete changeover. I mean, that's generally why most kids transfer anyways, because they're not comfortable with how the new staff is running things. So you just never know, is what I'm saying. Either way, I think Oklahoma set at the tight end position if they can land Nate Roberts, Hassan Bram, or Lincoln Cure. One of those three, with what they have coming back with Devon Mitchell and all that, and Caden Helms, Caden McIntyre, I really don't think you're, in 2025 hurting at that position. Would you agree with that, Parker?
No, not at all. And
Yeah.
again, I think you said it. If you land one of those three, you're content. If you land two of those three, my goodness, man, that is a coup
Yeah.
because there is no question. I mean, you watch the tape on any of those three guys, there is absolutely no question that those three are all top 10 tight ends in the nation and may very well be top 5 tight ends in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
They're also just three awesome dudes, too. Like, culture fit for them at Oklahoma, hand in glove. Awesome human beings. I've really enjoyed covering them to this point.
Yeah. Great guys. Let's move over to the offensive line. Well, first off, quarterback transfer. I expect there to be a potential announcement here over the next few days. I think Oklahoma and Casey Thompson have moved in the right direction, and we will have that covered for you pretty substantially if that takes place on OU Insiders. So make sure you watch that. He's in Florida right now, trying to move his gear to wherever he's going to go. I think most people kind of understand how this is going to go. At the end of the day, Casey Thompson's coming into the University of Oklahoma looking to help the university that he loves. If he ends up choosing them. And that's kind of been the narrative that has been posed to me from his people. Like, look, understand Jackson Arnold's team, completely get it. But at the end of the day, they want to help the University of Oklahoma. And if OU and Casey Thompson can get things lined up and to the point where there's an announcement in the next few days, then I think it's a win-win for both sides, Parker. And then you flip over to the biggest question mark on the team going into 2024, and that's the offensive line, right? Like you feel good about every position on the team now, except for offensive line. But is it that really that big of a question when you look at what Eugene Brooks, BJ Brooks did at the Under Armour game? You look at what Akinkumi did. You look at Fabici Nawawa being brought in. You look at Spencer Brown being brought in. You got Michael Tarquin brought in already. So you got 5 new guys that you feel can help right off the bat. And that's not even naming Isaiah Autry. Who else is in the 2024 class that I'm missing off the top of my head?
EPL.
Eddie
and
Pierre
Josh
Louis.
Isosa.
Oh my gosh. And Josh Sosa. Like Eddie Pierre Louis, I talked to somebody today and they said that guy right there, if you did it right, if the recruiting services come from a coach, by the way, the recruiting services did it right, that guy should be a 6-star because there's no way that you should overlook a guy that moves that well, that is that big and has that big of a work ethic the way that EPL does. Eddie Pierre Louis, by the way, we're talking about the 5-star or the high 4. Is he the 5-star on Rivals? I believe he is, right?
He is not yet a 5-star, but will
But he will
definitely
be.
have the opportunity to be
Yeah,
in
he's
last
very
rank.
close to being a 5-star because of where he's ranked on Rivals. So you've really got a chance to be better than what people think. Just inexperienced, young, it's brand new, plus a new quarterback. Having said that, if you add Zalance Hurd, the SEC first team all freshman to the equation, and you add a starter at Alabama guard, Terrence Ferguson to the equation, hello. That O line goes from being a problem, potential problem, that I don't really think I don't think it's going to be as big a problem as even people thought, Parker. But it goes from being that to, okay, now all they got to do is just put the pieces together and that thing's going to be really good.
Well, and let's address the Michael Tarquin edition for a second.
Yeah.
And all I want to say about that one is that Michael Tarquin was out of his depth last year at USC playing right tackle. That was a terrible, that was a complete botch job by Lincoln Riley and his staff. Michael Tarquin had no business playing right tackle.
He's a guard.
He's a guard. And to take a guy that had only played left guard and left tackle at Florida and move him out there to right tackle where he has to suddenly mirror all of his footwork and play a position that is foreign to him and not well suited for his skills, that's asinine. Completely mismanaged. Cost Michael Tarquin a year that might otherwise have been much better utilized in order to get him some film towards a potential future in the NFL. I think you bring him in, look at what he did at Florida, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You bring him in with the expectation that he's going to be much closer to the player that he was at Florida than the player that he was at USC, because Bill Bedenbaugh is not going to do with him what Lincoln Riley and Josh Henson did with him. That will not happen. And so I think that addition has the potential to be good for Oklahoma. Fabici Nawawu is obviously a guy that can start from the jump. And as we look at the potential of Zalance Hurd and Terrence Ferguson, man, Hurd would be a seismic addition, because rarely, and I mean very rarely, do you see offensive tackles with that combination of size, speed, power, and lateral quickness hit the transfer portal, let alone, right, a guy who committed to LSU and hails from the state of Louisiana. I think, and this was kind of my thought when he first got in the portal, especially with the position he plays. I thought, oh, well, he's just doing it to get a pay raise from LSU, and he'll end up right back in Baton Rouge. But it sounds as though, from the sources I've talked with, Brandon, the Sooners have a very real shot of pulling that off. And you get a guy or potentially get a guy in Hurd who is 6'6", 340 pounds, and utterly immovable at that tackle spot. And the other thing that I've been told in talking to some folks that know that situation is that he is one mean son of a gun if you piss him off. And you know who's kind of cut from that same cloth is Jake Sexton. So you put Jake Sexton at one tackle, you put Zalance Hurd at the other tackle. Jackson Arnold's hardly getting touched in 2024.
So people instantly, the reaction to that, and this was my reaction whenever I was talking to sources the other day. Okay, well, what happens with Spencer Brown? Well, he's gonna have to fight for a spot,
Yep.
and that's just the reality of it. Like the Oklahoma's going into it like they want depth, and they want really good depth. And I think when you look at the EPLs of the world, the Akinkumis, the the BJ, I just went blank here just now, but um, Eugene Brooks, BJ Brooks. When you look at BJ Brooks and you look at all those guys that they bring in, yeah, they're young, right? But if you can have the names that we just threw out there as your starters and you have those freshmen backing up, as talented as they are, I think you're okay. I really do. I think you're okay. I think you're looking at a very talented, and I think it sets you up for when those transfer guys leave. Now you've got guys that backed up and got some meaningful reps, right, in big games to just slide in there. And now you're just now Beanbo's in a comfort zone where he's just rotating guys in every few years. You know, you start for a few years, off to the NFL, you go, new guy comes in that was behind you. And I think ultimately that was how things worked prior to 2022. And now since 2020, I guess since the 2021 season ended, it's been a lot of just rotation through transfer portal. And Beatonbow getting the 5 guys that he got in the 2024 class, getting the guys he got in the 2023 class, I think you're now starting to see they're going to use some of these transfer guys to fill in for a year or two. And then they're going to take the guys that they brought in through the high school ranks and throw them in. And now you're looking at a completely different way where you don't need to go grab a bunch of portal guys to fill the position. You just grab a portal guy here, portal guy there, and just throw them in there with a high school guy, 3 or 4 high school guys that you have starting that you've recruited, and the symmetry of the offensive line is a lot more fluid, right? It's way better, and so I like the way this has been trending for Oklahoma. I like the way Beatonbow has started to set things up. I know that fans don't like the heavy transfer portal stuff that they've had to do this year, but I don't think that's going to be a trend moving forward with the amount of offensive. Do you agree with that, Parker? The amount of offensive linemen they've been bringing in the last few classes.
Yeah. Well, and especially just looking at this freshman class, man. I was talking to a source the other day that's as good as it gets on the offensive line picture at Oklahoma. And suffice it to say, the Sooners truly do believe that BJ Brooks, Daniel Akinkumi, and Eddie Pierre-Louis are all capable of playing from the jump if Oklahoma needs them to. And I think best case scenario, right, you don't need them to. The transfers you brought in, the more experienced guys you have, those allow EPL and Akinkumi and Brooks and the rest of that freshman class to develop at their own pace and not have to get rushed into action. And sometimes, you know what? You get rushed into action, you end up with a budding superstar who proves his worth. See Caden Green this past year.
Unfortunately.
And so if you have to rush one of those guys into action, again, I think they're going to be ready for it. I don't think it'll be the worst thing. But best case scenario, you give those guys at least a year to get stronger, to get more technically sound, to learn under Bill Beatonbow, and you're able to cobble something together in 2024 for the SEC that is going to, A, protect Jackson Arnold, and B, open holes in the running game. I think the pieces are there for Oklahoma right now. I think they would be there in spades if you were to land one or both of Lance Hurd and Terrence Ferguson.
So let's talk about it. From my understanding, and I was just talking to a source earlier today. Sounds like Zalance Hurd, Ole Miss is like trying to make a really strong push for Zalance Hurd, but I don't know that they feel real confident right now. It's a matter of if he decides now, when I say now, within the next 72 hours,
Yep.
and if he doesn't decide before Friday, I think, uh-oh,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
might just have to kiss it goodbye at that point. I think
yeah.
the best way I can phrase some of the conversations I've had with folks in and around the Switzer Center about Zalance Hurd is that the overall tone is optimistic, but not what I would call confident, if that makes sense.
hmm So,
Optimistic, but not confident.
and then Terrence Ferguson went from, I think it's the opposite. I think they went from not optimistic to,
Correct.
okay, looks like they may have a really, really good shot at getting him. And I think, again, if that truly is the case, if push comes to shove and you're starting Spencer Brown, Terrence Ferguson, Bates or Erickson or Bates or Everett at center, and then you've got Tarquin and Sexton. And I didn't even name Nawawu, or you're starting Nawawu, right? Um, you got Brown, Ferguson, Everett or Bates, and then you got Nawahu or Tarquin, and then you got Sexton. I think at the end of the day, you're okay with either one of those. Now, would you love to have Zalance Hurd? Hell yes. 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 If you could add both those guys, that offensive line is just stupid, Parker. It's just stupid. Just stupid. Stupid talented, experienced. Maybe they haven't played together a whole lot just yet, but between January and August, with Bill Beanbo coaching, I think you feel pretty good that things are going to iron out. All right. And so I get the fans really wanting both. But if you can land one of the two, you're still going to have a really legit offensive line and a better offensive line than at the end of the season, at the end of the Alamo Bowl. Everybody was like, oh no, what's this going to look like? And now everybody's like, okay, if you can just add one of those two,
Yep.
you're good. Your offensive line is going to be one of the better ones in the SEC next year as far as experience goes. You should be okay.
And the refreshing reality, if you're an Oklahoma fan, is that offensive line was the position where it felt like the Sooners needed to be most proactive in the
And they
portal.
were.
And that's easily the position with which they have been the most proactive.
And on the flip side, I think you could say, okay, well, they didn't grab the nose tackle. You're right. They
That's
didn't.
fine. There'll be another portal window for that.
There'll be another portal window here in a few weeks that'll open up, or about in March and April and May. And let's see where see where things go from there. And as you can see, there's still people popping in the portal. Like, you can always hop in the portal. It's
As a
just
grad
there's
transfer,
rules and,
yes.
yes, as a grad transfer. So but there's rules and regulations at which, for every conference, like, you can only hop in the portal and hop from Big 12 to Big 12 school from this point, SEC to SEC school from the ACC. You get it. The P4 programs, right? So there's rules and regulations, which, if some of them are in the Big 10 that hop in that are nose tackle guys, or if they're in the ACC or the Big 12, or even some from the former Pac 12, I mean, I think that's where you look at it and you go, okay, I think Oklahoma might take a swing there. But if they're SEC guys, you might as well go ahead and kiss goodbye. Not happening. Not happening until September. So just make a note of that if you're one of those people that thinks everybody that hops in the portal is a name to watch. Because if they're not, if they're from the SEC at this juncture moving forward, they are not a name to watch. So that's about how you should look at it. Um, Real quickly on, well, do we want to talk about the junior day this podcast? Because it's
We
pretty
got time to
legit.
talk about the junior day. Obviously, that list is still taking shape. We've reported several of the big time visitors over on the board at ouinsider.com. So
Mhm.
if you're curious about who some of the headliners are going to be for Oklahoma later on this month, that is a great place to be right about now.
Yeah. And 2025 recruiting is about to kick off in a big, big way. Oklahoma already has one of the top 5 classes in the country, and you would expect it to stay that way if they continue to trend with the players that they are trending with right now. And we'll have that for you on OU Insider. OU 13-1 men's basketball. They play at TCU tomorrow night, which we're recording on a Tuesday afternoon here. And then they go to Kansas to play in Lawrence on Saturday, which if Oklahoma can somehow get out of Fort Worth with the victory and be 14-1, man, oh man, is that game going to be have such a magnifying glass on it in the world of college basketball, Parker. It's gonna be huge.
Man, this team, if they can go end that drought at the Fog this weekend, that's how you signal to the college basketball world that you've arrived
15 and
and you're
1 if
for
that
real.
happens.
If that statement hasn't already been made by Porter Moser and this squad, that statement has very much will be made should the Sooners pull it off up in Lawrence this weekend. I'll be there. I'm stoked for it.
Are you going?
Yeah.
I hate you so bad. Like that's on my bucket list is to go watch that. And I can't do it because my kid's got freaking 7-on-7 practice and basketball games this weekend. So oh the I love my kids. Sometimes I just want to go cross off a bucket list. And this is will be the last time I'll be able to do it and actually go watch an OU team play as far as conference play goes. So kind of stinks, but it is what it is. Um, how do you think the TCU game is going to play out real quickly?
I think they win. I think they
I do
win.
too.
I think that sets up a showdown with Kansas with a ton at stake for both of those teams. More so for Oklahoma with the drought in play, but that should be the most watched game on the college basketball schedule this weekend if the Sooners do get past TCU without any issues.
Man, I cannot believe this team. They're exciting and they're fun to watch too. Like they're so athletic. Like Jalen Moore blocked I can't remember who it was for Iowa State the other day. And I sit there and I was just looking at watching it and I went, when's the last time you saw an off guard come flying through there with his hands, his elbow above the top of the square on the glass and just pin that ball off the backboard? Like it's been a while since they've had that sort of LinkedIn athleticism across the board. And they do. And that's what I think that's what makes them so much fun is they're not only athletic, but they can flat out shoot. And obviously McCollum is just he's that guy. He's that guy. As long as he's playing well, OU is always going to be in the game. And he kind of reminds me of Allen Iverson,
I know he's a
just a
fun
little bit.
watch, isn't he? Like he's the
Gosh.
difference maker. He's the straw that stirs the drink right now for Oklahoma. And they're getting contributions from everywhere. But JV McCollum looks like a legit superstar in college basketball.
Yep. All right. So that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider and the Visor Streamers podcast. Thank you all for watching. If you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel, subscribe. We're trying to get up to 25,000 by the start of the first inaugural SEC season. And we can't do it without you guys. You guys, we do everything because of you Sooners fans. We don't have our job if it's not for you guys. So thank you for all that you do as far as, you know, watching our content, listening to our content on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. If you haven't, subscribe there as well. And then go to OU Insider. Look, $9.99 a month. It's totally worth it. Spring ball's rolling around. All the junior days. Evaluation period is starting right now. So next
Also,
week, go ahead.
$8 a month if you sign up with the annual plan. $8 a month.
$8 if you sign up with the annual plan. So essentially, it's $99.95 for the whole year, and you will get all the way through next year's national title if you watch or if you sign up right now, which means you'll get through all the stuff that's going to happen as far as junior days, 2025 class. The coaches are hitting the road again starting next week, which means tons of information, who they're out seeing, why they're out seeing. Are those kids that they just went and saw, are they going to be coming to take a visit to Oklahoma? We'll have all that for you on OU Insider, where Oklahoma stands with all those players and those targets. The big junior day at the end of the month on January 27th with the 2025 class. The following weekend or the week, 2 weeks after, I can't remember, is a 2026 junior day as well. We'll have all that for you. Then obviously the transfer portal stuff, we've continually keep our head on a swivel as Oklahoma looks to fill their roster, finish up their roster heading into spring. We'll see we'll try to be on top of it. Who They hire in place of Lee Davis, the on-campus recruiting director, and then obviously spring ball. And then after spring ball, you get the official visits, you get the evaluation period, you get the coaches on the road, you get all the camps coming up as well through January, February, March, 7-on-7s, all that. Parker and I will be on the road for that. We'll have updates for you on all the top recruits all across the country. And then obviously the Champion Barbecue, the Party in the Palace, then the SEC inaugural SEC Media Days for OU Insider and Oklahoma heading into the SEC, and then fall camp, then the season, and then rinse, wash, repeat, all the big stuff. We have that for you. And then plus all the basketball, softball, baseball, we have it covered for you all across podcasts. We've got it for you as far as content, recruiting, all that on OU Insider VIP. It's totally worth it. There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of members on there. And that's why the board is always popping and so busy. Topics starting by you, the members, and you're communicating with all the fans across the board. And it's so exciting, so much fun to do. And that's why Parker and I love our jobs, and the rest of the OU Insider staff does as well. So thank you guys so much. All right. That's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider and the Visor Students podcast. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.